Hey, welcome everyone to the May 22nd Lower Providence Township Zoning Hearing Board meeting, and if we could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to start with roll call. Gary Brown.
Here.
Travis DeCaro.
Here.
I'm Chris Curtis, and I'm here. Mark Kaburski.
Here.
Joseph Pucci.
Here.
Rusty Raymer is not here, and he's excused. Our solicitor is Keith McLennan.
I'm here, and with me is my associate Teddy Starling.
Okay, thank you. And we have two hearings tonight. Before we get started with those, Gary, if you could read our statement.
Yes, Chris. The Zoning Hearing Board will give all interested parties an opportunity to ask questions and testify in connection with the applications being heard tonight. After a witness for the applicant completes testimony, you will be given an opportunity to ask questions of that witness. In addition, after an applicant has completed its case, you will also be given an opportunity to testify, which will require you to be sworn in as a witness. If you wish to participate in the hearing on an application, you should complete the entry of appearance form, which will be provided to you by the zoning officer, Mike Brzezinski, who's sitting here to the side. We ask your cooperation in maintaining silence during the hearing so that both the board and the court reporter can hear the testimony of the witness. We also ask that all cell phones be turned off.
Thank you, Gary. So we have our first hearing, and Mark, if you could read that for us, please.
Sure. Hearing number one, Z-25-07. Joseph Van Artelen, 937 South Park Avenue, Audubon, PA 19403. The applicant is proposing to construct a pole barn in the backyard. The applicant seeks relief from section 143-37.A to allow a 10-foot side yard setback where a minimum of 20 feet is required, and to allow for a 10-foot rear yard setback where a minimum of 60 feet is required, together with any other relief deemed necessary or appropriate by the board. The parcel ID of subject property is 43-00-10042-00-4. Subject property is located at 937 South Park Avenue in the R2 Residential Zoning District.
Thank you, Mark. Do we have someone here to represent this case? Come up, sir. And you're Joseph, I take it? Yes, sir. Okay, can you just raise the mic as close as you can? And we're going to swear you in before we get started.
Sir, you promise to swear testimony about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Can you state your name and spell, please?
Joe Van Artelen, spell last name, V-A-N-A-R-T-S-E-A-L-E-N.
Okay, thank you. What we typically do when we don't have someone who's presenting without legal representation, we ask Mike to summarize the case for us. So, Mike, if you could do that for us, please.
Thank you. For the board's consideration is a variance request by Mr. and Mrs. Van Artelen, apologize for the name, and at 937 South Park Avenue. They are seeking to construct a pole barn towards the right rear of their property. The variance is a dimensional variance, which is 10 feet from the side property line where 20 feet is required, and 10 feet from the rear property line where 60 feet is required. This is in the R2 zoning district, as the board is probably familiar. The property in itself does take access right off of Park Avenue. In terms of unique physical attributes to the property, I'm not aware of what is creating the hardship in that regard, so I'm going to ask the applicant to speak to that a little bit. And that'll go to the second part, which is how it can not be developed in compliance with the zoning ordinance. It is in keeping with several properties in the neighborhood, including the property to the immediate north of that, in which there are several structures. It's a property that's got quite a bit of history here in the township. There the property will not be, the pole barn as it is proposed to be developed will be buffered from most neighbors. There is a neighbor in the rear that does have a pool there, but will have appears to have some landscape buffering there. Basically, I'll also ask the applicant to kind of speak to the premise of it being the least piece of relief that's possible to make this project work.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So, Mr., I'm going to try to get your name right, Van Arsdalen, if you could just tell us a little bit more in addition to what Mike told you, and then we'll ask you some
Sorry,
questions.
Mr. Chair, one thing, Mr. Archdale, and I just have a question. So the application is in your name. Mike mentioned your wife. The deed's in the name of you and your wife. I presume that your wife is supportive of this application as well, and I suspect she's sitting in the back there, and that if you said no, there'd be a problem. So I suspect that's the case, correct? So we can amend this application to be both you and your spouse, correct? Okay, thank you. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Good, thank you. So,
So the current, the 60 feet setbacks for the township, if you look, we had plotted it out, the 60 feet for the rear.
I'm sorry, just to interrupt. I think we have a pen that you can.
Laser pointer
laser
there?
pointer that you can point out the property so we can understand where you're referring to. There you go, thank you.
So 60 feet, it brings it out essentially on top of the attached garage to the house. And then it's also on top of the rear deck with the 60 feet and then the 20 side setbacks.
So you're saying that this is already non-conforming because the 60 feet already imposes into your incursions, as an incursion into your structure? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
And then so currently there's a 10 or a 12 by 24 shed located right here, and this is my proposed location with this variance to add that pole barn. So
But to remove that shed in the process?
yes, sir. Yes. So the structure is essentially already there, and I'm looking to add 22 feet in addition to that rear and front setback.
Okay, thank you. So that's a pretty good explanation of the rear setback. What about the side yard setback? What's the hardship there?
Honestly, it's aesthetically and functional of the backyard. Again, this shed where it's located currently is, I think it's 6 feet off of the side setback. So I'm extending that out further to try and conform a little more and just keep the backyard functional and all of that.
Okay. Do you have anything else before we ask you some questions?
No, sir.
All right, just to get started, I just want to confirm, in your application, you circled that you have public water. Do you have public sewer as well?
Yes.
Okay. And then on the figure, I just think it's a typo. It says 137 South Park, it's 937. Okay, I'm going to ask the board what questions you'll have.
I have something. I know you have an overhead door in this. Is there any intention on extending then the driveway into the backyard as well?
No.
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 Okay.
Little too pricey.
Okay.
What are you using the pole barn for? Why the extra space?
Got a lot of stuff. Cars. I'm a hobbyist with cars. Just woodworking. A lot of cars. My wife can attest to it. Just a lot of stuff. 2 kids. So we got a lot of stuff, and just something, a space to accomplish things.
So you'll have electricity there?
It's not in the works right now. It's just the pole barn.
Okay.
Yeah.
You said cars, you work on cars, you said?
Yes.
So there'll be cars in there that you'll be working on?
Yes. Just personal vehicles. I have 2 hobby cars, basically.
But you don't intend on extending the driveway back to that at some point in the future?
No.
You're just gonna drive across the lawn?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And when you said no electricity, no other utilities as well?
There's an overhang shown on the elevation drawings. Where does the overhang fit in relation to your house?
What overhang are you talking about?
Garage door, right, your garage door, and then you have that there's an overhang.
The porch.
Oh, on the pole barn we're talking. Just a lean-to porch.
Where is that lean-to in relation to like your house?
It would be on the left-hand side. So it would run along this side here.
Okay, so from the street, you would look at the garage door then?
Correct.
What's that next to your property? What's that? There's like stuff there. Is that a house with stuff there in the aerial? It's like
To the right here?
Right there, yeah. Is that? Because there's a driveway that goes right by your property.
Yes. Yeah,
And-
that's our neighbor. Yeah.
Neighbor.
Mhm.
There's stuff there on the. I'm not sure on the aerial. What's all that? All that cars parked there, a truck or something?
Just various.
There's stuff.
Mike said there was a history.
But not your stuff.
Not your
No.
The, Mike had mentioned landscaping, things like that. What do you have there, and what do you plan to do?
So currently, this section here, essentially the whole side yard here is pine trees, established, very large pine trees, and then here as well, there's some arborvitaes, and then my plan will be to, again, the structure's already here, there is nothing directly behind the shed currently, but my plan will be to add shrubbery to just give a buffer for in the future.
What do your neighbors say?
Everybody's good with it that I've heard, so
You've heard, what does that mean?
I have nothing negative. It's all been thumbs up, so.
So when there was a sign posted in the front of your property saying this property is subject to a variance request, did you get anybody knocking on your door saying, what's going on?
No,
Did you go to any of your neighbors and ask them whether they had any objection to
I
this?
did, yes.
Okay, and how many of them did you go to?
The neighbor directly to the right of me,
Okay, and that person's response was,
thumbs up.
have at it.
Yeah.
What about to the left of you?
Have not talked to them, no.
Any reason why you haven't spoken to them?
No,
What about the person behind?
have not,
Have not.
no.
Have you had any conversations with that? Do you know that neighbor behind you?
No, not really, no.
Because you bought this place in 23, it appears on the deed, right? So you know the person on the right, do you know the person on the left?
We do, yeah.
Okay. And everything's cordial, there's no Hatfields and McCoys there, if you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right. The next issue is, this is a rectangular lot, it appears, right?
Yes.
Have you looked at the rules regarding variances in terms of what you have to prove, the 5-part test? Have you done any of that work? I don't want to presume that you didn't because you're a smart guy, but the question is, have you looked at that at all?
No, I have not.
Okay. Despite the conventional wisdom, variances aren't given out like candy. You don't just get them because they say, okay, looks good. You have to meet a 5-part test, one of which is you have to prove a hardship. And how do you prove a hardship? A hardship is not something like an economic hardship, for example. Can be in certain instances, but not typically. And usually the hardship comes from the oddity of the lot. Now, you're suggesting, I presume, that since it's a non-conforming lot, because the setback already is in violation because your structure doesn't meet the 60-foot setback in the back, right?
Correct.
Okay, you're following along what I'm doing, this is good for you. So that's, in essence, what you're saying is the uniqueness of the property, it's already non-conforming, right?
Yes.
When was the house built?
1961, I believe.
Okay, so
59 or 61.
how big is that house? It looks like it's relatively large, does it have an addition to it? Sorry, that's a compound question. How big is the house?
1,900 square feet, if I remember correctly.
Okay. And the portion of it in the back, which looks like an L shape from the rooftop, is that an addition or is that, it was always there?
It is an addition, yes.
Okay.
early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s.
And then obviously that part that's to the top of the structure, that's the garage because it's at the end of the driveway, correct?
Yes, sir.
How are you going to get back to your hobby enthusiasm pole barn with cars and vehicles? What's the plan there?
So there's a 10-foot gate attached off of the side of the house,
Okay?
and then just pull in.
So you're going to drive back there, open that gate and drive back there. There's not going to be any sort of macadam or paving or E.P. Henrys or anything like that?
No, sir.
Okay. So, all right, so the hardship is the unique physical circumstance of the property is the setback issue that already exists, I suspect, because it's, normally when we say hardship, the property's unique, it's like a pie shape, or it's octagonal, or it's just not regular.
Right.
What are your side yard setbacks now? Are they conforming?
To the
Side yards, I mean, the 20-foot side yard setbacks. Do you have 20 feet between the building and the property line, do you think?
So this to the garage here,
Right?
it's a 10-foot gate. I would say it's probably about 18, 19 feet. It may be
Close, but not
It's-
completely.
It is very close, yeah.
Was the garage added after the building was already
No,
structured,
it's
built?
original.
It's always there, okay. All right, so, do you know how wide the lot is? From property line to property line?
I could pull it up. I have something for you, I think. I want to say,
Just trying to help you to try and define a unique lot here. Is it unique? Mike's helping you here. 120 feet wide, is it?
Yes.
Okay. That doesn't make it particularly narrow. I mean, if it was like 80 feet, I'd say, well, gee, that's a narrow lot, that makes it unique, but this is 120 feet. All right. So Mike had talked earlier when he made his presentation about other similar structures in the neighborhood. Can you describe that for us?
as in what?
Well, if you're going to put a pole barn there, is there something that's similar that's already there that other people have pole barns, for example?
There is, yes.
And how many do you think there are?
In the immediate area, I know of one sticks out in mind.
Okay.
That is 2 houses down, right here.
Okay.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. And then, yes, there is another pole barn, the opposite direction, 6, 7 houses down as well.
Okay. And are they relatively new pole barns, do you know?
The one, try and show you. This one right here, I
Right.
believe that's relatively old, 20 years.
Okay.
And then the opposite direction, keep going down for me, please. I think it is a little farther down.
The reason I ask is one of the factors of the 5-factor test is will the essential character of the neighborhood be altered as a result of what you're planning?
Yeah. I think this is yes, it is. This one here, that pole barn's no more than 5 years.
Can we tell what that one is, and do we know if we had that before the board? I don't remember it, but Michael, do you remember anything about that one?
No, I'm sorry, don't.
And that lot, that's the one where the border is already highlighted there? Is that the property you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
And I don't know what that, yeah, so where's the pole barn? Right there.
Yeah.
So it's not a rear yard setback issue, it's a side yard setback issue with that one, it appears. Right?
Yes, yeah.
That's where a garage typically would be, but they made it into a pole barn, it looks like. Okay. Now, the question, the other factor that you have to consider is the variance that you're requesting. Is it the minimum that could be obtained by altering the standard setback requirements. And I guess the question from that perspective is, when you look at your place, there's some distance between the back of your house and where your shed currently is, right?
Yes,
How many feet do you think that is?
that's 10 feet currently.
10 feet off of the property line, the rear property line, right? And the side property line.
The side is currently 4 to 6 feet.
Okay, all right, okay. So you're helping by putting it 10 feet off is what you're suggesting. But how about from that, from the front of the shed to the back of your house? How many feet do you think that is?
To give you just a rough guess, I think it's about 65 feet from the front of that shed. I think roughly 65 feet.
And Tina, are you going back to that? Is that where you're going? Yes. Please. Because you earlier had said that you thought that it was already, the 60 feet rear yard setback was not attainable with the house as it currently is situated. Is that right?
Correct, yes. If we were to go 60 feet from the rear,
The property line, it would be,
it would be sitting on top of the attached garage and the rear deck.
got it. So if the distance from the front of the shed to the back of your house, or the garage, let's say, it's going to be less than 65 feet, right?
Yes.
Okay. The only reason we're asking that, or I'm asking it, is because is there another place where you can put this pole barn to get more compliance with the ordinance as opposed to 10 feet? 10 feet's decent, don't get me wrong. Most people come in here and they ask for 5 feet. Or they ask to put it right up against the property line, which doesn't work for obvious reasons. You want somebody to be able to maintain it, and you don't want to be on somebody else's property to maintain it. So that's the issue that the board's going to have to consider, is whether the location that you propose is the best location for altering the ordinance with the least amount of alteration, if that makes sense. Because that's one of the standards that we have to meet.
Gotcha.
All right.
As the lot sits, that back area is the flattest, least.
Okay, that's what we want to hear. We want to hear why it has to be there.
Yes. So as our rear yard, as you walk up to the house, the grade is much steeper. That back section of the
It drops off.
Correct. It is that back section where the shed is currently is the flattest.
So your house sits up higher, is what you're saying. And then it gradually goes down to where that shed is.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know what the grade is from
I
the?
haven't
Okay.
gone that far now.
All right. But if you were to move the proposed location from where that shed is to, let's say, toward the middle and further closer to the house, could you do that based upon the topography?
Where are you asking?
Well, where the shed is, if you moved it down the screen on this map, if you move it down toward the property line on the left, or I'd say,
over this way.
yeah, over that way, and then further up from the back of the property toward the house,
Right.
it almost sounds like it's smack dab in the middle.
Yes.
Could it be put there?
I mean, again, there would be some extensive grading and taking.
But this is what we want to hear. This is what we want to hear. So you're saying it's not as feasible to do that because of the grade.
Yes. The grade, and then we have pine trees there, established pine, and.
It could impact those. And I presume that if the board were inclined to grant you the variance that you're requesting, that you would have no objection to including buffering wherever is necessary to keep the idea is we don't want to upset the neighbors because you want to put a hobby house in there to do what you're going to do. And you got the rock and roll going, and you're back there, with your sleeves rolled up, and your buddies come over, and you're drinking some beers and doing what you're doing, and the neighbor's like, "Oh my God, this has now turned into a party central." So often the conditions would be a buffering. Do you have any objection to buffering?
I don't.
Further questions, Mr. Chair?
I'm having a tough time with your dimensions because it's not here. So I'm drawing stuff up and it's not working for me. So how far approximately is the rear of your home from the backyard, from your rear yard setback?
From the house to.
From the, so you have, on your sketch here where you have the rear of the home, you have 26 feet, I guess, I'm not sure where that's to, but from that rear, how far from there to your back property line?
Do you have a copy of that I could look at? 'Cause I don't remember.
You can have mine. Come on up. This one?
It's the one that's up there.
And you can have this too if it makes it easier.
What are you asking, sir?
So the rear of your home, so down in the lower left corner,
Yes.
right? So how far is the back of your house to your rear yard
To the
setback,
proposed
to the
location.
perimeter, to your property line in the back?
Roughly 85 to 90 feet.
So then, I'm just going on what you said, where the proposed structure would be on top of your garage. It's not working out for me. So it would be 90 minus 10 minus 32, so that's 90 minus 42. So you still have about 45 feet from the rear of your home. So I don't see in your explanation how that structure would be sitting on the top of your home, given that the rear is already 90 feet.
The pole barn to be 60 feet from the rear property line.
Right.
Would
but-
be, yes.
That's right. But it doesn't have to, if it's 30 feet back, and you're still 15 feet from the rear of your home. So I'm just, like what Keith said, we're looking for what's the minimum variance you really need. And I'm just challenging that 10 feet is kind of gross here, unless you could tell me that there's something in the front of the proposed structure that would prevent you from putting it there. I just don't know that 10 feet is enough of a rear yard setback.
So then it goes back to that section where the garage would potentially be, that's where the drastic grading
Okay.
of the rear yard is.
So if you were to move the proposed structure closer to the house, that's where you have grading issues where it starts to drop off, and that's where the hardship would be if you move it closer to your house, away from the side, or away from the rear yard property line. Okay, that's what I was looking for.
How much further forward could you bring it without affecting the grade level?
So the proposed 10 feet setback and then the 32 length of the pole barn, I think they're maybe 5-6 feet of a buffer additional before you start to hit that extensive grading and excavation.
Okay. Yeah, any other questions?
The grade does what? It slopes down to the neighboring property? Is that what is the grade you said? It's going down, up? What's
Down,
So it goes down, so there's like a swale there, or you have runoff going through there? Is that what the deal is?
yes.
Mike, you're going to say something?
Thank you. Just a point of clarification. Earlier, the board asked about the pole barn at 1027 South Park, further down, the one that we looked at. That was, I was able to check the records, that was rebuilt in 2019 after a fire, so kind of takes that
Okay.
out of consideration.
All right, thank you. So, just following up on Mark's question, do you have any water issues with your property?
No.
If you put this pole barn where you propose, will it deflect the water in such a way that it will create problems, to the best of your knowledge, for any of your neighbors or the general area?
No, sir. So the shed currently there's no gutters or anything, no proper drainage Obviously, if the pole barn is granite, then there will be gutters and then proper drainage to alleviate anything in the future, but no, there will not be any issues.
Given the absence of any dimensional drawings, Mike, I assume that there isn't any impervious issues with the pole barn?
No.
Okay. Any other questions before we do a few other business? Do we have anyone in the audience who has any questions for Mr. Van Arsdalen? Anyone? Okay.
I think his daughter might, she's raising her hand back there.
Very good. All right, Keith, you want to do housekeeping?
Well, I want to ask you a few more questions, because one of the items that the board has to consider, or several items that the board has to consider under the ordinance. First question is, will the installation of this pole barn increase any traffic in the neighborhood? I suspect the answer is going to be no.
Correct.
Does it increase the risk of fire or panic in the area?
I would certainly hope not, no.
Does it overcrowd the land or create undue concentration of population? I think the answer to that is probably going to be no, too. Is it suitable for the property in question? There's a sizable backyard, but there's some issues with the grading, which that, too, could make the property unique, if you follow me, for the hardship that we're looking to try and find. Intrude upon the adequacy of natural light and air to adjoining properties. Now, that I don't expect is going to be the case. But the back of the property, what's to the right of your property there? It looks like it's just wooded.
Yes, for the most part, yes, sir.
What is that? Is it a person's home or a,
Yes.
okay?
A collection of everything, woods, and then the old, I think it was a watermill. That is the house.
Oh, okay. And that's all one parcel,
Yes.
as far as you know.
5 acres, I believe.
Interesting. So it's a mixed wooded, looks like they have their own stuff going on there. All right. Create extraordinary burdens on public, private, or community water systems or upon groundwaters or wells within the neighborhood. You're not a well, you're public, so that's not a problem. Overburden the public sanitary sewer system. You can have a toilet back there, you have to run to the bathroom, to the house every time you gotta go.
Use the house. Too much money to put a bathroom in.
Place undue burdens upon the fire, ambulance, or police, or emergency services provided throughout the neighborhood. Suspect not. Cause adverse effects to the appropriate use of adjacent properties. Think it's gonna have any impact upon that?
No, sir. Again, just because of the current shed there. The neighbors to the rear is gonna be essentially looking at the same dimensions. And it'll just be,
So that shed is as deep as a pole barn would be, or as wide?
the 24 feet, yes, sir.
What about the height? Is the height gonna be much
The
different?
height will be,
Right.
I think, 2 feet, I believe.
Okay. Cause risk or danger to the safety of persons or property by improper location or design of the proposed pole barn. That would be the only issue, I guess, is sightlines. Would it otherwise adversely affect the public health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the community? Do you think it's going to have any adverse effect upon public safety?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, on that. Tina, we have some things that we have to deal with, correct?
Before you do that, just
Sure.
one quick question. Can you talk about the foundation of the pole barn? Is it going to be concrete? You're laying the foundation for it?
It will, yes.
Okay.
Inside the pole barn will have a concrete floor, yes.
And why do you need such a big one?
Got a lot of stuff.
I know this is America, everybody has a lot of stuff.
That's,
And those are two little children over there, they don't have big things.
well, they grow quick and accumulate a lot of stuff.
You can't part with a lot of stuff, can you?
Not yet.
How big's your house?
I think about 1,900 square feet.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Sorry, folks. All right, so what we do now is, what we've done here is build a record. You see Tim sitting here with his hands going a mile a minute, trying to keep up with me, and he's very good at that. he's building a record. What's the record for? The record's in case, if you don't get what you want and you want to appeal it, there's a record of what happened. And then the court would look at it, but they wouldn't have you come back and testify, they'd look at the record. So from that perspective, we're building the record, and the first thing that you have here is a certificate of posting, which indicates that the property was posted with a sign by someone from the township. Do you remember that sign being put out there? Do you have any objection to us marking that as Exhibit B1 for Board 1? Next item is going to be the letter that would have been sent to people within 500 feet of your property, because the ordinance requires us to send that to people saying, this person's seeking a variance. Do you have any objection to us including that in the record as B2 for Board 2? Next item is a mailing matrix, which I always joke is your next Christmas card list, if you will, because these are all your neighbors within 500 feet of your property. Do you have any objection to us including that in the record as B3? The next item, of course, is going to be the certificate that those folks that are on that B3, which is the mailing matrix, receive that letter that's B2 by mail. Do you have any objection to us including that in the record as B4? And the next item that we often include, which we don't get in time for these hearings, is proof of publication. Not only is your property posted with a sign, but notice is published in the newspaper of general circulation. So everybody who reads those, who nobody reads them anymore, but whoever does, they might see it. So from that instance, we're going to mark that as B5. Any objection to doing that when we get it?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, your application. We talked about your spouse being an applicant as well. And the application you have, that you've submitted, we're going to mark as, excuse me, A1 for applicant 1. Any objection to that? Along with its attachments, correct? And you signed this document, correct? Okay, no further questions, thank you.
Okay, just one last check with the board, anything else? Okay, so
I have one last question. I know these are coming slow for me, but are there plans to run a business out of here? Woodworking shop or fixing cars or doing a hobby that turns into a business where you make money?
No, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, with that, we're going to pause the meeting, and we're going to go in the back room and deliberate for a bit. I'll be back shortly. Okay, we are back. Joe, I believe you have two motions to make for us.
Yes, I do. The application of Joseph Van Arsdalen, docket Z 2507, for a variance from section 143-37A2 of the Lower Providence Township zoning ordinance to permit the construction of a 24 by 32 foot pole barn on the property with a 10-yard setback where a minimum of 20 feet is required, and the R2 residential district is granted, subject to the following conditions. The construction and placement shall be as per the plans presented this evening. And 2, buffering of the rear and side of the structure, per testimony tonight, to match the current area, the current foliage that's there, to provide a buffer to the neighbors, front and side, that be provided as well. And that the motion is granted.
And we also have the condition to remove the shed.
That's
That's on the next one, okay. All right, so as Joe read, do we have a second for the motion?
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay, so that's motion number 1.
Motion number 2, the application of Joseph Van Arsdalen, docket Z 2507, for a variance from section 143-37A2 of the Lower Providence Township zoning ordinance to permit the construction of a 24 by 32 foot pole barn on the property with a 10 rear yard setback where a minimum of 60 feet is required, and the R2 residential district is granted, subject to the following conditions. Construction placement shall be as per the plans introduced into evidence this evening. Buffering as noted previously, and the existing shed shall be removed.
Thank you. Do I have a second for the motion?
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Congratulations, Mr. Van Arsdale. Good luck with your pole barn.
Appreciate it.
Welcome. Okay, we have our second hearing, and Travis, if you could read that for us, please.
Hearing number 2, Z-25-08, Sean Lowry, 1605 Horseshoe Trail, Phoenixville, PA 19460. The applicant recently acquired the subject property and is seeking an interpretation that the existing nonconforming use as a non-resident storage on the first floor is a legal nonconforming use. In the alternate, the applicant seeks a variance from section 143-275 to allow for non-hazardous storage by a non-resident tenant. The parcel ID of the subject property is 43-00275-00275-00-1. The subject property is located at 3868 Germantown Pike in the EVC Evansburg Village Commercial Zoning District.
Thank you, Travis, and I believe you have counsel for this, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, before we get started, if we could swear Mr. Lowry in, because I'm sure he's going to testify.
Very promise to testify that the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Yes. Do you state and swear your name for the board?
Sean Lowry, S-H-A-W-N, Lowry, L-O-W-E-R-Y.
Okay, thank you, and I'm sorry I don't know your name.
No problem. Good evening. My name is Brad Osborne. I'm attorney licensed in Pennsylvania, bar ID number 312169. The office located at 1263 West Valley Road, Wayne, Pennsylvania, 19087. And I've been hired to represent the applicant, which is 3868 Germantown LLC, in their application tonight for either an interpretation that the pre-existing storage is a legal non-conforming use, or alternatively, a use variance under the code to permit the property owners to use the space as a non-hazardous single-tenant interior storage space, which is not currently a permitted use by right. In support of the application, I have a couple of things. I would like to present a supplement to the existing application with some photographs, as well as a letter of support from the neighboring property owners, if I might.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
In addition to that, I received this a little bit late, so I apologize that it was not included in that packet. I also want to provide a copy, which we'll get to during testimony, of notification that Mr. Lowry sent via email to the resident tenants that already reside within the building.
Thank you.
Sure, you can have a seat. And if there's nothing else at this time, I'd like to proceed with Mr. Lowry's testimony.
Yes.
Mr. Lowry, briefly introduce yourself to the board and explain your relationship to the applicant, 3868 Germantown LLC.
Yeah, I think when it first turns out, before you begin, I'm a little slow on the uptake, so I'm going to ask Mr. Osborne first to address the legal argument associated with the interpretation, or is that what you want to use him for? Because I just don't know what the basis for the interpretation is, and maybe you can give us some background on that.
Yeah, certainly. By way of a little bit of background, the application itself was actually prepared and filed before my involvement in the case. However, it's my understanding, and we'll get to some of that through testimony, that the property itself was constructed in the 1940s It's always been in the nature that it has been. It's always been used as storage. And the use and the building itself predate the code. That's kind of the general gist for that from my kind of legal background and perspective. The main crux here is whether or not Mr. Lowry and the owner, the LLC, qualify for a use variance.
Well, that's a different issue, obviously. The variance is the whole Megillah, as they say, as opposed to the interpretation. So I'm just trying to understand, so this was a non-conforming use, right? The storage.
Correct.
And the storage was utilized previously by the owner, correct?
Yes.
Now the proposal is that the new owner is not necessarily going to use it for their own storage, but they're going to rent that out.
Yes.
And that, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I apologize. I didn't mean to cut you
Oh, that's
off.
okay.
Just a point of clarification, the former owner was not a resident. So the interpretation we had received by inquiry or the information we had received by inquiry was that it could potentially be used for storage of a resident because this is a tenancy building, a residential tenancy building. It could be used by a resident, therefore a tenant. However, it is our understanding that the use in the past it has not ever been used for that. So the tenants do not utilize that space. It has been used solely for either external storage or the storage of the non-resident owner.
All right, so I was a little premature in asking you for the legal argument, because you're going to introduce that. It seems to me that Mr. Lowry's going to testify to that, I suspect.
Correct.
Okay.
May I add just in case I don't add it later to that? So one of the challenges that Mr. Mrzinski and I had when I proactively approached him in discussing the potential uses for the space, where it appears to predate the zoning ordinance built in the 1940s, circa 1940s.
Right.
It appears, to the best of my knowledge, that it was built as it stands today, but of course I have no way of knowing with certainty. The previous owner owned it since 1998 till January of this year.
Who was the previous owner? Do you
Michael
remember?
Rodati.
I'm sorry?
Michael Rodati.
Okay.
And just according to my conversations with Mr. Rodati, he used it. He had owned a number of buildings. He used it for his own storage needs that served the different buildings that he owned, and he also had leased it out to 3 other individuals. So that's just from my conversations with him.
But how do we get that into evidence, Mr. Osborne? Because obviously it's hearsay what somebody told you. But
I understand.
I mean, we'll take it for what it's worth, but it's problematic from that sense. You don't really have a witness to say what it was used for. That's your belief, correct? That
Correct.
It was used.
That's just through conversation with Mr. Rodati. I do know that he used it because when I purchased the property, he was still utilizing the space until post-settlement.
Okay, so he was using the space.
Correct.
For storage.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, so sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No problem. So, Mr. Lowry, could you briefly explain to the board your relationship with the ownership?
Yes. So 3868 Germantown LLC is the entity that owns the property. I am the manager of that entity.
Okay. And how long has the applicant, the entity, owned the property?
We purchased this property in January of this year, 2025.
And if you wouldn't mind, and it may help us to go to the next slide on here. Could you just generally describe, for the benefit of the board and everyone in attendance, what the property is, kind of what the characteristics of the property are?
Could we, I think the next one is the aerial view, which might be a little bit easier. Could I have the pointer, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so the subject property, 3868 Germantown, is this right here. So you can see there's the existing building. I believe it's 4 stories. There's 7 residential units in here currently. The existing residential units fully occupied upon purchase in January of this year. There's obviously a shared parking lot with the adjacent property here, which is a row of garages on the ground level and 4 residential apartments. I do not own this property. It's a separate owner. And there's 2 points of entry or egress from Germantown Pike, 1 on each side, and then the shared parking lot, as you can see there.
And in terms of the particular space, within the property we're talking about this evening? It may be helpful for the board if you could point out to where that's located from this aerial view.
Sure. The entrance to the garage/storage area comes down this extension of the driveway that comes down to the garage door entry on this side.
Okay.
And I don't know what direction that is, but
I think that's all right.
west it appears.
When the applicant purchased the property in January, what was that garage space used for?
In January, the space was used by the prior owner, Mr. Radati, for storage.
Okay. And you personally observed the space being used for storage?
I did, yes.
Okay. And since taking ownership of the property, have any of the tenants utilized that space for storage?
They have not.
Have any of them approached you about using that space for storage?
They have not.
Have any of them told you that they use that space for storage in the past?
No, and I communicated what our application was, as you see in the email, as part of it, but in some one-on-one conversations, so they were aware of the intended use for the space.
Let's talk about that email. This is the one that you handed up, Mr. Osborne, right?
Yes.
So you want to mark this? I'm going to mark it as applicant. Let's mark it as applicant 2 because applicant 1 typically is the application. Is that okay?
That's fine with me. Thank you. So, Mr. Lowry, I've handed you what we just discussed and marked as A2 or applicant 2. Could you describe this document for the board?
Yes, this is email correspondence between myself and the residents. They were blind copies, so you can't see their individual email addresses. But I was able to communicate with them through this. Some had conversations with. One does not have email, so I utilized a phone call and a text message to convey the information.
And could you just, you're the one that drafted this email,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
And what was the purpose of you sending this email?
Yeah, I mean, when I took over ownership of the building, it's all about getting on, creating a personal relationship. I self-manage this building, so I know all of these individuals, and this was just part of open, transparent communication with them, so they weren't caught off guard with the plans for the property.
And I think it's important to know all of the tenants that currently reside at the property were residents when the applicant purchased the property, correct?
That is correct, yes.
So is it fair to say that your intention with this email was to give the residents notice and an opportunity to appear tonight?
Absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to make sure they were aware that they were invited to, and I don't know if if mail goes to the residents of a building like this, so this was just my way of making sure, outside of the posting in the yard, that they were aware they were invited to come speak if they had an opinion to share.
Fair enough. So I want to go back and focus now on the garage space. Can you, and we'll go through some photographs, can you describe the space itself and its current condition?
So the garage space itself?
Yes.
So yes, it is, I mean, in the photos it'll help a little bit. It's approximately 1,450 square feet, 10-foot ceilings, 10-foot garage. I would call it oversized or commercial bay garage door, 10-foot high, single entry point into the space.
But it's not these garages in the image.
That's correct. That's the adjacent building.
Okay, so you want to, okay, thanks, Tina. Keep going.
There it is.
Right there.
Yeah. So that's the one entry point off of Germantown Pike, and it would just be turning left there. You can see so that's a 10-foot high per my measurements garage entry there, and the space it's basically rectangular in shape, effectively inside with 10-foot ceilings the whole way across. Inside, you just given the topography of the lot, it is up off Germantown Pike, but as far as the only entry point into the garage, it's kind of sunken down, I guess, to allow the drive entry there. So in the front, on the Germantown Pike side, it's completely below grade, to the best of our estimation. There's no windows, so we appear to be completely below grade there. On the rear side, on the right side, based on the picture we're looking here, we are approximately 7 foot below grade and above. There's some small windows that you might be able to see in one of the photos, a couple windows. You can see one there in the utility closet, and there's a couple others like that. And if I'm standing under that window, it's still a foot above my head to the base of that window. So the left side there is paralleling Germantown Pike, and that is completely below grade.
Would you mind scrolling up a few? There's an outside photograph. Keep going a little bit more. Right there. So the picture that we're presenting on the screen, does this represents the sloping you were talking about and the below grade on both sides?
Correct. You can see this is the parking lot, the rear section of the property. You have stairs coming down to get there, and obviously the driveway itself slopes down to get into the garage space, and same with the front as well.
Okay. And that roll-up garage door is the only manner of ingress and egress into that space?
Correct. I mean, there's a laundry area here that has a door into there, but that's it's effectively the same entry point. There's no other entry to the space on the front, rear, or other side.
Okay. There's no staircase that goes upstairs inside the building.
Right. There's no access to the residential units from inside the garage space.
Okay. When you purchased the property, you were aware of the current zoning designation for the property?
Yes. EBC, Evansburg Village Commercial, if I'm not mistaken. And just that the corridor there where the zoning for that zoning district is a variety of commercial uses that vary, of course. I've seen retail, contractors of various kinds, and a variety of other commercial uses, primarily.
Sure. And from your perspective, what is the hardship when it comes to requesting your variance? What is the hardship that prevents you from using any of the permitted uses under the EVC code?
Yes, I thought long and hard about this, and having an awareness of the various permissible uses and the burden of proof, so to speak, that I have when requesting a potential use variance. I look at it as two parts that come to mind. Number one is the unique topography of this lot. While it's not drastic, it doesn't appear drastic, it really limits the viability for, in my opinion, for many of the more typical permissible uses that might fit in the mold of a mixed-use building with ground-level commercial use. The topography, having the slope down to the only entry point, appears to just from my observation unique to this property specifically. If you think about the photo of the adjacent property that we share the parking lot with, all the garages on the ground level are at grade. There's nothing below grade. Just driving down Germantown Pike, I certainly didn't survey every other lot, but just from what I can tell, it just seems to be a unique limiting feature for this particular lot. The other component when giving consideration to permissible uses is the prohibitive cost of retrofitting, of the construction component, of meeting the requirements from a code standpoint of fitting out the space for retail, for office, for medical office, for the variety of permissible uses that the code allow. And that, again, is as a function of the topography particularly, where getting the natural light requirements, the potential additional form of egress, specifically if we have people there on a day-to-day basis for providing necessary egress for the opposing side from the entry point to the other side, would be very difficult to, especially when we're either partially or fully below grade on the front and back, to be able to provide the necessary egress without significant alterations to the topography, retaining walls, things like that.
So you already spoke about the building that's directly adjacent to this that shares the parking lot. What about other buildings that are adjacent to your property in the neighborhood? Do any of them appear or exist to have spaces like yours that are below grade?
None that I could see visibly.
Okay. And predominantly the properties or buildings around are, what are they used for?
The majority that I was able to look into are commercial use. There's a number of multifamily properties. There's landscaping contractors, a church across the street. There's some single-family residences that are rental, and I don't know the makeup of all the ownership components. But it's a variety of predominantly commercial uses along that Germantown Pike corridor where the EDC zoning lies. The other point, I forgot about the existing fire escapes. If you could go back, please, to that rear photo. Just from an existing condition standpoint, just another limiting factor is the existence of the 3 fire escapes for providing appropriate egress for the various permissible uses that would involve having employees on site, which the storage would not require. It's not something that would be, again, if we had to relocate those or work around those, just very restrictive with what we could do. In the front of I don't have a picture to share with you, but in the front, in addition to being either fully or close to it below grade, there's also the bank of gas meters that are right along that front of the property as well.
And again, this is the way the property existed at the time the LLC purchased it.
Correct, yeah. I've made no alterations to the exterior whatsoever. The other consideration, too, is many of the permissible uses, it's without any visibility from, it's very nice to be on Germantown Pike, but being nearly at or fully below or close to it below grade in the front, there'd be no visibility for a retail or for any use that would typically benefit from that visibility from a main corridor like Germantown Pike. The other nice thing about storage, it doesn't require any type of signage. Really restricts the demand on additional traffic for, we have 7 residential units in our building, 4 residential units in the adjacent building that we share at the parking lot that has an access easement through our parking lot already. So having a greater demand on regular traffic during business hours for many of the permissible uses was another limiting factor that might have impacts on the residents there.
And so could you detail a little bit more for the board, even though it's in your application, what your proposed use is specifically?
Yes, so I would be looking to utilize the space for a single non-resident tenant for strictly non-hazardous storage use. I had referenced some potential conditions to consider for the safety and welfare of the residents on site and for the neighboring properties. To honor the quiet hours for access that would mimic the residential lease quiet hours, to allow no work on vehicles whatsoever inside or out. This is strictly for interior storage. There will be no exterior storage permitted. There might be other things that I mentioned, and I'm certainly open and receptive to other conditions that the board might want to consider.
Okay. So your use would not include the need for regular customer traffic.
That's correct, yeah. I would foresee, and I guess it's difficult to predict, but 1 or 2 vehicles per week for that type of use. As a rough average, I would expect.
And there would be no ongoing on-site sales or retail activity.
Correct, that would be, and I would have conditions on my lease to make sure that's not permissible. And if they were in violation, that we could take necessary action.
And you're not proposing any exterior changes to the structure as part of this use variance request.
That's correct.
But because it's your understanding that if you were to use a by right use, permissible use, you would also have to request variances in order to make the property appropriate for those uses.
That's the best of my understanding in reviewing the code, and I referenced just a handful of examples of what I would see as a typical use for this type of mixed, what could be considered a mixed-use building, where retail, and I don't have it in front of me, but you know, the parking demands would, given the setup of the existing parking lot, would require additional need for zoning relief from a parking standpoint as well. When the storage would be one space for every 1,500 square feet per the code, and that would be not require additional relief.
Okay. As part of your request, are you requesting any changes or additions of signage?
No, I don't anticipate any signage whatsoever for this use.
Okay. And your intended use plans to abide by the noise regulations and requirements?
Absolutely.
Okay. And your use case also intends to significantly curtail and restrict exterior activity to the property as well?
Correct. And just make sure I understand what you're thinking. Is that, I mean, this use would, I mean, the only exterior activity would be, you know, the occasional vehicle coming to access whatever is being stored kind of thing, or place items in there, but it'd be a much less demand than if it was a variety of the other permissible uses that would have regular customers' activity coming through each business day.
And to be clear, you're not intending this to be some type of self-storage facility with multiple lockers or multiple partitions inside the garage, correct?
Correct. And that's when and just to take a quick step back, I had approached Mr. Mrozinski proactively on my own volition just before my thought process was I'd rather not continue the use that the previous owner had without making sure, in my review of the code, just to make sure with the township that was a permissible use. And in Mr. Mrozinski's review, and I believe his letter is part of the package, and response letter in requesting a determination, just indicated that he was open to residents using it for storage. And I just wanted to mention, you know, the viability of that from my perspective. The amount of storage space that might be offered to a residential tenant, obviously it varies, but it might be 4x4, 4x6. Usually it's framed off. You have a locked door. And that might take up 150 to 250 square feet of a 1,450 square feet space, as you saw in the photos. It would still leave a tremendous amount of unutilized space, in my opinion.
For your proposed use, is it your belief that it more closely aligns with the character of the neighborhood nearby?
I do. Being that it's in a predominantly commercial corridor, I feel that it fits in well. And it's a use that, I mean, effectively has been used since, to my knowledge, 1998, when the previous owner initially purchased it. But again, I understand that might be considered hearsay. I have no way to prove that, but I believe the continuation of that use would be pretty much status quo as it has been for 20 plus years.
Can I interrupt you one moment, because I don't want to lose this? So the interpretation letter that you referred to that Mr. Mrozinski issued based upon your request that you previously just testified to, can we mark that as A3?
Yes.
Because it doesn't just magically appear in the record, so, okay. Thank you very
I
much.
believe it was submitted as part of the application. I could be wrong.
Mine's not attached, but, so we'll just use it as A3 if that's okay.
Yes, totally fine.
There may have been other exhibits that I included with the application that might be beneficial to request to be. I forget what.
We've already marked that A1.
Okay. Yeah, and again, I know it might be a bit of a stretch, but from the county's perspective, the assessor's perspective, it's marked as, Mike might recall, multi-use storage. And I believe, and I didn't ask for clarification from Mr. Mrozinski, but I think in his research, he was able to find that it was marked that way from the time it was approximately built in the 1940s. So it's being taxed that way, but it indicates some semblance of evidence that use has been in place for quite some time. At least since the last countywide reassessment, but Mr. Mrozinski might have additional information.
And Mr. Lowry, I really just have one more question. As the board considers your variance request, your use variance request, you are open to reasonable conditions to make sure that your non-conforming use minimizes the impact on the community, right?
Absolutely. I feel this use does minimize the impact, primarily from the traffic component, the regular visitors, and I'm absolutely open to reasonable conditions and with my intent of having a single tenant for the entire space, the leasable space, for non-hazardous, non-resident storage.
Okay. One more thing before I forget. As part of the supplement that I provided to the board and the township solicitor, we had attached an additional supplemental exhibit marked A2, which I've put in front of you. Could you tell the board what that document is?
Yes. And we may have duplicate A2s, but if we could just mark that accordingly. This is a letter from Mr. Michael Rodati. He is, if you could please go back to the aerial view, I believe it's the third image. Okay, well, you can see that he is the owner of this property here. As I mentioned, it's a shared access easement through the property. Traffic comes in this side, goes out this side, so his residents come through already. So we have that additional burden of traffic coming from that pre-existing condition. And then he also owns the property, which is just off screen here to the east, which is a residential rental, single-family property.
And for transparency and clarity's sake, he was also the former owner of this property.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. My only request would be that the supplement be marked and added.
Let's talk about that for a second, because I jumped the gun by marking the application as A1, and then the letter or the email of May 8th as A2, and then the interpretation letter as A3. Do we have any objection to marking what you handed up as Exhibit A1 and making that A4?
No objection from me.
And then the one from A2, marking that as A5?
Also fine.
And let's see, you made reference to a county reference to it being storage. That was in my file. I presume this is what you submitted with the application?
That's correct.
And it's marked as Exhibit E. Can we mark that as Exhibit A6? Any objection to that?
No, sir.
No objection.
Okay. And I presume you're moving those for admission?
That is correct.
Is there anybody in the audience who has any questions or objections to those documents? We're all here just as spectators to see how well we all did tonight, so thank you for that.
I have a quick question just for my own clarification. Please.
Sure.
Just because I had multiple, I had inadvertently marked exhibits A, B, C, D, not knowing the proper
It's
protocol.
okay, that's fine.
Just to make sure that the exhibits that are part of my application, do they individually need to be marked?
Well,
Or
that's-
or is the application package as a whole one of your exhibits that will be?
Well, let's mark Exhibit C, photos of the garage/exterior. Does that ring a bell for you?
Yes.
Let's mark that as A7, how's that?
Yes, thank you. The deed is in there as well if you want to.
The deed and the plan. Mark that as A8, the plan, how's that?
Yes, thank you.
And then the deed will mark as 9.
Yes.
Thank you.
That fair?
Yes, thank you.
A9. So you're right about the exhibits, and it's nice to have them pre-marked, but I just cut you off, and I apologize for that.
Thank you.
But let's, before we get into questions with the board, I just want to see if we can segregate out some of this so that we are dispensing with things relatively quickly. So I appreciated the presentation. The question is, are you in essence abandoning your interpretation request and just going for the variance? Or are you sticking with the interpretation request, and if that fails, going for the variance?
I believe we were seeking the interpretation request. In the event that fails, we're asking for alternative relief as a use variance, and, any other conditions or relief the board would deem appropriate.
So before we get to more questions, can you, based upon his testimony, can you give the legal argument as to why the interpretation is wrong?
I cannot.
Okay. Now, it's all yours, Mr. Chair.
Okay, what questions do we have?
Is that, how big, does the storage go all the way under that building or only
Not
partially?
completely, I would say about 2/3. There's also a one-bedroom apartment with entry on the complete opposite side, on the east side of the building.
So there is a adjacent to the storage is actually a room?
There's
Living
what is
space?
the electric, the Pico room, as I call it. The meters are on. So yeah, so on the other side of that wall, you would have an apartment, and on the left side, on the Germantown Pike, is a small room that just houses the electrical meters and the panels.
The living space is below grade then?
No, on her side, just given the topography of the
Oh,
property,
because that's some-
she's fully above grade, or that apartment unit is fully above grade.
And is there a fire separation between this space and the rest of the apartment?
It's a concrete block foundation. I'm not sure exactly what's in between the storage space and her apartment, but
The walls and the ceiling to the apartments above?
I would be speculating on it because it's completely covered with drywall. It's hard for me to know with certain the original construction.
The wood columns or is that steel columns?
Steel columns.
Steel columns.
Yeah, it's a block foundation for all the way from the foundation level all the way up to the roof line on all four sides of the property.
But it's more of the separation
I
from
understand.
use, because you have storage now, but storage separated from a residential component above, and you're renting it out, so safety factor of if something goes wrong down there, making sure there's a separation, and I think it's a 1 hour separation required between the storage and residential.
I mean, somebody could sit there and rent that space out and put paper files in there. You know, it might not be hazardous, but boy, if there was a fire that ever started.
Let's talk about that for a second, Mike. I mean, obviously, if they're granted this relief, they'd still have to comply with occupancy permits, wouldn't they? Is that space that doesn't have an occupancy permit for this purpose, or not? They still have to comply with safety codes, they still have to comply with Uniform Construction Code, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And I also believe, if I might add, the existing by right use cases would also pose those same, if not more significant challenges. It's office space, it's retail, so you're going to have file storage, you're going to have people coming in and out. Other approved use cases that are out there are cafes and restaurant style businesses, food prep businesses. All of those would pose similar or increased fire safety hazards. So we would expect to fully comply with whatever the code requirements are in order to have those businesses in there as well.
Right, they don't want nuclear waste stored there, or petroleum tanks, or anything like that. And that's something that you would have supervisory rights and control over, correct, Mr. Mrozinski, as the code enforcement officer?
Largely, there's a little bit of crossover with the fire marshal.
But that still is subject to that sort of inspection, regulation, et cetera. So it's not like he can just go in there and put 55-gallon drums of Limerick spent nuclear rods there.
Be safe.
Yeah, he's an engineer who worked there, so he says it's safe.
Provide some warmth. But like in the example that Gary reference with paper, for example, paper storage. So you would then seek approval from the township for whatever fire protection requirements could be imposed, like sprinkler systems or whatever.
Yes, whatever the requirements would be to safely have that use in place would be a condition we would agree to.
Other questions?
And there's equipment like the water heaters and stuff. Is that for the residents above?
Yeah, so there are, most of the units have their own water heaters within the unit. There's one water heater that serves the laundry area. There is another one that you see in the corner there with a boiler that serves one of the units. The remainder of the boilers are in a walled-off, concrete block walled-off space that, I think it's in one of the photos too.
It is.
That's the water heater for the laundry.
What are those? Is that the furnaces for the house, the spaces above?
Gas boilers for each individual apartment unit has their separate boilers.
And that's a concrete block walled off area
That's-
with a locking door.
That's separated.
Correct.
Correct. It has ventilation in there as well to the
And
exterior.
to get to that, you have to go. You can get to that from the outside. You wouldn't have access to that from inside.
It's right inside the garage on the right hand side. So that would be, I mean, the leasable square feet, the leasable space, of course, would not include that.
So in security purposes, so somebody that's in Tampa or to get to that, like the people who rent it out, you'll still have access to that space. So if you have to get to that, like the people renting it, you can still get into that space. You wouldn't have a separate lock.
We would ensure we have emergency access to that entire space, yes.
Do the residents typically access the boilers? Let's say something goes wrong, they don't
They
have-
don't, they just call me, I have 24/7 emergency maintenance in place.
So that's a requirement, so they, in what you're using it for now, that garage door is locked, they can't access that?
Right, there's a keypad that obviously they don't have the code for. The door that you can access that space from the laundry area, they have access to the laundry area because they use that for coin-operated laundry machines. But they do not have access to a steel door that enters into the storage garage space.
But from the laundry room, they can still get into the storage area, or no?
They cannot. They don't have access. They don't have the key that opens that door. That is a steel door.
So could you point for the board where the laundry area
Yes.
is?
So that door right there is how the residents access the laundry facilities. There's 2 washers, 2 dryers in that small rectangular room right there.
And that's completely separate from the storage,
Completely.
proposed storage area?
Yes.
And the boilers are behind that.
So the boilers are on this side here.
Over that side, okay.
Yes. So you can see the door right
Over
there.
okay, got it. Okay.
Right. So, and then the water heater is in the far corner, back there.
So that room would be controlled such that if you were to rent that out for storage, the people that own the storage wouldn't be able to access the boiler area for the
Correct.
residents?
So that'll be a key lock that they would not have access to. And that's again one of the other challenges with some of the permissible uses would be just making sure it's with the existing mechanicals here, which is only a couple of them. With the storage, it's pretty easy to just kind of you could just use red tape for the area to make sure that the storage tenant would know not to use that area, but I would need to have access to that. And then this area here, I would be marking off just for my own access, just to make sure I can come in from the laundry to access this water heater as needed. Otherwise, all the other residential units have their own water heaters contained within their units.
Anything else? Anyone else have any questions? So, what type of vehicles would you expect would be driving up to store or remove materials?
I mean, it obviously depends on, it could be a contractor's vehicle that comes in. I consider that driveway area to be a temporary loading zone, so my lease would restrict the amount of time that they could spend there. They couldn't park their vehicle there the entire day kind of thing, maybe 30 or 60 minutes. So it could be I don't know what it would be called, like a commercially marked van or a truck that they could access the material they need or drop it off, if it's that particular type of user.
What about a large, like 18-wheeler?
It didn't even cross my mind, to be completely candid. I wouldn't expect that.
Because my question is, I don't know, but I would guess that there's kids around that live in the apartments, and what if they're out playing and this big truck comes, how would that be managed if that, in fact, were to be the case?
Yeah, I think the only way I could manage it is to specify that as a condition of the lease that they sign with me. That wouldn't be, I hadn't thought of that, but that would not be something that would work, obviously. So, but again, I still see it as a less of a risk to the kids that live there, to the other residents with this particular use, just thinking of the expected number of vehicular traffic that would come with this type of use compared to other uses with regular customer visits.
And if we go to if you wouldn't mind scrolling up to the aerial view.
We also limit the hours of operation that you can go in there.
What I marked in my application just mimics what I have in the residential leases. I believe it's 7:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm open to other.
Do you have lighting back there?
There is lighting, yes. The lighting is all on a light sensor, so the exterior of the property is well lit in the evening as well as the interior stairwells.
So to address your question about an 18-wheeler, it seems likely that one could get into the back of the property. I'm not sure about accessing Germantown on that entryway there, because there is a slope and there is a curve there. So I believe Sean would be open to restrictions related to that as well.
Yeah, and the other thing I mentioned, and I understand the questions; they make complete sense. It's from my standpoint, again, that the safety and welfare of the residents in this building are of utmost importance to me, and that's also balanced with making the most reasonable use of the property that I have ownership in, given the limitations of the topography and everything else that was testified to tonight. But as far as my oversight, it's not set it and forget it. Like I said, this is not a third-party manager that oversees this property. I live in Phoenixville. It's a relatively short drive. I come up several times a week as it stands. I would have in the lease, at a minimum, semi-annual visits, site visits to ensure compliance with the lessee that's using that space to make sure that they're meeting the conditions that we have in place. So not an absentee landlord is the point.
Okay. Any other questions? We do have a couple folks in the audience. Do you have any questions? No? Okay. Keith, what else do you have?
I just want to make sure I understand the hardship. The hardship is the topography because it sits below grade and you can't do anything else with it as a consequence of that.
That is one of that is absolutely a hardship, yes, as we see it, and also the prohibitive expense of converting the use to a permissible use, given the topography, the existing conditions with the rear fire escapes, and meeting the needs if we have employees on their own on site. In my limited experience in the realm, that might require additional egress in the rear of that space. That would be very difficult given the topography.
Okay. And I think you testified
and the additional zoning relief that would come
right
in tow with the permissible uses.
So I think you testified to the character of the neighborhood about what's there, and that aerial sort of depicts that. It's a mixed-use area. And the minimum variance that will afford relief, you're doing one tenant there is what you're talking about?
Yes.
Do you have somebody lined up?
I do not.
Okay. And you said it wasn't going to be an auto repair facility?
Correct.
What would your ideal tenant be in there, you think?
Could be a contractor, and that's a broad term, but intentionally, just because it's hard to pinpoint exactly what.
They're not getting any part of the yard or the paved area to store anything.
I mean, outside of, just per the code, every 1,500 square feet for that use requires a parking space. But as I mentioned in my application, if that was part of this equation, it would be again, just thinking about the question on the 18-wheeler, I specified that it can't be an oversized vehicle. It would have to fit into a standard parking stall. So I would think, based on the code, I would need to provide a parking space. And just one for this use compared to some of the other permissible uses that we had highlighted.
And you can,
4 or more.
Right?
I'm sorry?
You can comply with that, right?
Yes.
Correct. And our concern would be, if not, if we had to go and attempt to utilize or leverage one of the by right use cases, a majority of them per code require many multiples worth of space.
It's a less offensive use is what you're suggesting.
Correct. Instead of a minimum of 4 spaces, we would only require 1 for storage use.
Right, as one tenant. Now, that grassy area there that you see, that postage stamp or whatever that is, that square area, do you own that?
I believe I own the majority of it, yes. I forget exactly where the lot line comes through, but it's approximately here.
Okay.
I think if we scroll up to the plot plan.
Oh, yes, thank you. As a rough guide, it's this proposed line here.
Okay. So that's not going to become a storage area for mulch or landscapers,
Absolutely.
yard
Condition might be
equipment?
done,
or
yeah,
that
no,
sort
I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, that's okay.
Sorry. Correct. No exterior storage will be permitted whatsoever.
Got it. Let's go through our list. It's not going to increase traffic congestion in the streets surrounding the subject site, you don't believe, I presume,
I
right?
think it would be the least offensive of the uses under consideration.
The risk of fire or panic or endangerment of public safety. I guess it depends on what you're going to put in there, right?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, if Mr. Brzezinski or anyone, any of the staff require, or the fire marshal, I would welcome any inspections required with this use.
You're not overcrowding the land or creating undue concentration of population. It's not intruding on the adequacy of natural light and air to adjoining properties, right?
Correct.
Doesn't create any extraordinary burden on public, private, or community water systems. There's no real need for any of that, right?
Correct. This is public water, public sewer.
It's not going to overburden the public sanitary sewer unless you put somebody in there who's dumping stuff down drains, which I'm sure you're not going to do. No burdens on fire, police, ambulance, etc. And any adverse effect on the appropriate use of adjacent properties. I mean, what's below on this picture? What's below you there?
Below is on the other side of Germantown Pike.
Below where your structure down there.
This is Mr. Radati also owns a farmhouse that is rented out. There's a twin style homes the next 2 lots over that are also rented out.
So those are homes.
Correct. They're rental, and then I believe the car mechanic is the next one down.
Okay, they all have backyards similar to what you see there in the bottom of the picture, I
They do.
presume.
Same, approximately the same depth. And then above this property is a multi-unit as well with a detached building in the rear.
And anybody putting storage in your building isn't going to change any of those parameters.
In my opinion, that's correct.
Right. All right. Otherwise, adversely affect public health or safety or morals or general public welfare of the community, or just put in storage. If the storage complies with what the fire codes and the other codes comply with, it's not a problem, I presume, right?
Right, and I mean, for what it's worth, it's a continuance of the use since 1998, potentially before. I just have no way of proving that, nor does Mr. Mrzinski. But the burden on the neighboring community, neighboring properties would be effectively the same. The difference is I proactively wanted to approach the township for compliance.
You're a good citizen is what you're saying, right? Came here looking for permission as opposed to forgiveness.
People tempt me to follow that path, and that's just not how I like to operate.
Well, good for you and good for us. Anything else, Mr. Osborne?
No, sir.
Nothing else you want to regale us with in terms of your eloquence and legal acumen?
I don't think so.
Okay. So you saw what went on before with respect to the record that we build, and Tina's going to help us with this. First one, of course, we mark as B1, certificate of posting, that the property was posted with a sign. And that sign is validated by this posting. B1, do you have any objection to including that in the record?
No, sir.
Next item is the letter that would have been sent to people within 500 feet of your property, notifying them of this particular hearing and your request for a variance and/or interpretation. Any objection to including that in the record as B2?
No, sir.
Next item is the mailing matrix of the people within 500 feet of your property who would have ultimately received that letter that was B2. This is going to be marked as B3. Any objection to that?
No.
And the B4 is a certificate of notification that the letters were sent to those 500 folks or people within 500 feet of your property Any objection to that being marked as B4? No, sir. And B5 would be the proof of publication as it relates to the newspaper publication, which we don't get until after the hearing. Any objection to that being included in the record as B5? Not at all. Thank you very much. Any other items that you folks have?
Just, you may have said this already, but the type of storage, would you expect to have vehicles stored in there?
If I'd be curious to hear what the township's perspective is, but I think, I mean, effectively, it's a garage, so potentially, but no work could be done on the vehicles whatsoever.
So when Dave Markle wants to bring down his elaborate collection of cars, you could store them in there, right?
A car collector?
Yes.
If the township wants to make a condition that is not a permissible
I'm
utilization.
just asking whether that would be something that you would entertain. I mean,
As part of my application, I did, or part of my letter to Mr. Mrozinski originally, I did include that as one option, so potentially, yes.
You did include that as one option?
Yes. Car collector. But no work would be permitted on those on the vehicles.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Okay, there's no one in the audience that has questions. Keith did his thing. So we're going to pause the meeting and we're going to go into the side room and deliver.
before, did we ask you whether you spoke to your neighbors? And I guess the neighbor to your east is the previous owner, so he doesn't care.
East and west, well, I mean, he shares a parking lot with me, and I don't own, he doesn't have ownership in this building, I don't have ownership in his building. I disagree, I believe he does care. He could care. So I spoke
Did you
with
talk
him.
to him about it?
I talked with him. He has a letter of support. He owns
That was the one that you
both
provided
properties that
us.
flank the building. And obviously, I communicated with all of my.
Does he own the garages that were on the other side?
Yes, he does.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, we are back. And Mark, you have two motions to make.
Proposed motions of the zoning hearing board. Number one, the application of 3868 Germantown Pike LLC, docket Z-25-08, for an interpretation that storage of non-hazardous materials by a non-resident in the building at 3868 Germantown Pike is a continuation of the previous non-conforming use under section 6.2 K and L, 143-275 and B, 143-145 regarding land, and 143-146 regarding buildings of the Lower Providence Township zoning ordinance in the Evansburg Village Commercial District, EVC, is denied.
All those, I'm sorry, do I have a second to that motion to deny?
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor of the denial? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed to the motion for denial? None. So that motion is approved for denial of the interpretation as Mark so noted.
Number two.
And number two.
Number two, the application of 3868 Germantown Pike LLC, docket Z-25-08, for a variance to permit the storage of non-hazardous materials by a non-resident in the building at 3868 Germantown Pike as a continuation of the previous non-conforming use under section 6.2 K plus L, 143-275 A and B, 143-145 regarding land, and 143-146 regarding buildings of the Lower Providence Township zoning ordinance of the Evansburg Village Commercial District, EVC, is denied.
Do I have a second for the motion to deny that?
I'll second.
All those in favor of the denial?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed to the denial?
Aye.
Okay, so we have three votes in favor of the denial and two opposed. So the motion is denied. Or the application is denied. Okay, so that concludes our business for tonight. For those of you listening in, we do have another meeting this month for the zoning hearing board, and that will be next Thursday. at 7 o'clock at Arcola, and that is for the continuation of the RHD hearing. So with that, I'd like to request a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate your participation in our zoning hearing for the township.